Greetings, my excellent friend. Welcome to the Heavy Metal History Report.
All right, so I am sitting here, not physically, but I have all the band members from the newest band on Prosthetic, Wristmeetrazor, Justin, Jonah, and Brian. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
John, for having us.
Yeah, of course. So I guess real quick before we kind of get into stuff, let everybody know what you do in the band, because, I mean, being a three-piece, that's pretty bare bones there.
Right. My name's Justin, and I play bass and also do vocals.
All right, and I'm Jonah. I play guitar and do vocals.
I'm Brian. I play drums and do vocals.
Nice. Yeah, so all you guys trade off on the vocals. So reading about it, you, Jonah, like initially started the band like all by yourself. What kind of prompted bringing other members in to round out the group here?
Honestly, Wristmeetrazor started more as an outlet for feelings I had that I wasn't able to convey any other way than music, and what better way is there than music?
Yeah.
And basically, I put out the demo and did it all myself. I did the drums, guitars, bass, vocals, all of it, and a nice little 3-song, and immediately saw that there was interest in it, and almost immediately right off the bat, after having done some work with Justin and his previous band, some design work, we had already conversed before, and he sent me a message on Facebook and said, "Hey, I love this demo. I love what you're going for here. How would you like to make this into a full band?" And at the time, I wasn't playing in any active bands. I was kind of in a period where I was just kind of going about whatever, just writing music whenever it felt right, so on and so forth, and decided, yeah, we're gonna do it. So that's pretty much how it started.
So you kind of took that approach of not like rushing things too quick and just letting everybody feel each other out to see where you guys were at as far as like writing music together?
Yeah, pretty much. I know from, being that it came directly from, my creative standpoint as far as the demo and everything. I've written a lot of music up until this point, almost all of it, with Justin and Brian along on the helm as well. But it kind of started with just wrote that demo, and that was all me. But then as soon as we moved on to start doing the double 7-inch that we did, it became more of a group effort in terms of bringing in other ideas that I might not have thought of. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty much how it's been going as of right now. So yeah.
So as far as like all of you guys together, with the new record, when you started writing, was it still mostly like your ideas, or did people like Justin and Brian bring in other ideas that kind of helped shape the way the record ended up?
It very much was a collaborative effort between the three of us. The double 7-inches, we love those records and we love playing those songs. But with the LP, I think I can speak for all three of us when I can say that it's very much something that I'm very proud of, and the fact that it's very matured for the Wristmeetrazor sound. And having all three of us work on it together and really hone in on what we wanted to do and what everybody was thinking, made it what it is now. And so I think it's very mature compared to the previous material we've put out so far.
And to add on to that too, for this record, I think something that happened that was very different is at various points we would kind of have these demo tracks and we would elaborate on them and change them. And there was a weekend that I traveled to Jonah and we just pre-pro'd songs all weekend. So in order to do this record, I feel like there was a lot more of an evolution as opposed to the 7-inch or the double 7-inch, where the songs essentially went from pre-pro to recorded to out. There was no real transitionary period, whereas these songs had a pre-pro period and then a huge transitionary period, and then now it's about to come out next week.
Yeah, it seems like over the 2 years since like starting, around 2017, you guys have definitely like had a really upward trajectory as far as like songwriting and making everything a lot more cohesive, I guess, if that's the right word.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it's that's a good turnaround time too, I think, especially for a newer band. I feel like a lot of guys would just rather like sit on stuff for a while and perfect it, especially for the first record. Not that you guys didn't do that, but I think everybody kind of has their own creative pace that they work at, and this just happened to work out for you guys.
Exactly, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing I want to know that I usually ask this first, but I got ahead of myself a little bit. What are each of your guys like influences as far as metal, and how did you like get into the genre because of that? Because I know everybody has this different heavy metal journey and influence, and I love hearing about like the start. What intrigued you into it? If whoever wants to go first, we'll just go around in a circle.
Yeah. So from a very, I'll be first off to say that I've pretty much been born into listening to hardcore punk and metal. My dad grew up in South Jersey, and grew up going to shows at City Gardens, seeing bands like Mouthpiece and Gorilla Biscuits and things like that.
Nice.
And when I got to, I think when I started really being able to understand what I was hearing, around 2002, 2003, only 23. So, mind you, I was about 10, maybe, not even.
Wow.
But, my dad always had on, at the time it was Sirius Radio, now it's Sirius XM, but he had on Sirius Radio and always played the Liquid Metal channel. And, I would listen to bands like Zayo, Norma Jean, trying to think. There was another band that sticks out to me because it was just, I couldn't believe it when I was hearing it, but a band called Vampire Moose with 3 O's.
Oh shit, yeah, I remember them. I haven't heard that name in a minute.
Yeah, I know they weren't a very, very big band, but they had their time as far as I know. But yeah, pretty much, grew up listening to the radio with my dad. And then, after a while, broke out some CDs, heard bands like, Helmet, Quicksand, Throwdowns, Haymaker. And then, up until I finished high school, went to see, Slayer whenever we could. All different kinds of bands. I mean, I have a Slayer tattoo, and it's because of my dad, so.
Nice.
But, yeah, so that's pretty much my progression up until now.
Justin or Brian, which one of you guys want to go next?
I'll go.
Cool.
I had about the exact opposite childhood. I grew up in middle of nowhere, Kentucky, with a youth pastor dad. So I did not come from a family that was remotely interested in any kind of heavy music.
Yeah.
But my dad, as a youth pastor, he would get boxes of CDs, like from I don't know, I was probably in 4th, 5th grade, 2004, 2005.
Okay.
He would get these boxes of CDs to pass out to his youth group, and no one ever took them. So I would go through and listen to them, and he would get boxes from Face Down Records and Solid State.
Whoa.
So my first exposure to any kind of punk or hardcore was in 5th grade listening to like MXPX and Emery. And then it went from there to listening to like Norma Jean through middle school and Zayo and like Living Sacrifice and just those like core solid state bands. And then listened to those, found out about a very small local scene in middle of nowhere, Kentucky. And we had one hardcore band in Lexington called Dead Icons. And saw one of their shows, and their bass player, I went up to him and was like, I've never heard anything like this. This is the coolest shit I've ever heard. He gave me a box of CDs out of his car, and I felt like he gave me, it was like a Have Heart record, an American Nightmare record, and maybe like, I think it was Lowest of the Low by Terror. And through that, I just went through searching like related bands, and that's kind of how I got my start. It was a lot of hours spent on like lastfm.com.
Yeah, I gotta say, man, those early solid state bands, like the whole Christian wave scene, has some seriously solid stuff into it, and I think people overlook a lot of it because of like the association with like religion and stuff like that. But man, I remember getting into a lot of that stuff myself because I also grew up in the South. I'm in Tennessee, actually. So nice. It was the same thing. It was like people always like super into like Norma Jean and bands like that. I actually saw them back when they were Ludacris, I guess. Like way back in the day. But yeah, I think there's some hidden gems in a lot of those records, and you know, I don't know. I think that whole era of music is a nice little piece of history that people often overlook.
Oh, I think incredibly underrated.
I think you're probably the perfect person to interview us then, because we honestly love that entire era, but also don't really like or prescribe to the religious aspect of it. So
yeah,
that's awesome.
No, I'm on the same page, man. I in fact, you know, I bring this up a lot, but it's funny that a good amount of those bands that were on those Christian labels like did it just to get on the label, and then later like jumped ship and went to like, you know, wherever they went, like He Is Legend and Agony Scene, As Lay Dying. Yeah. It's all good. Yeah, it was like a thing that bands were doing for a while, just trying to get more exposure, because those labels were really, really good at marketing their bands. And I think that a lot of underground bands saw that, and they were like, let's just play the Christian angle and see what happens.
Oh, yeah. Because, I mean, at the time, like, playing Cornerstone was, like, the coolest fucking thing you could do as a heavy band.
Yep.
Like, I went with my dad and, like, my youth group every year for like 6 years, and it was always like the craziest shit I've ever seen. Even today, those sets at Cornerstone top almost every other show.
Yeah, my best friend's band, they played Cornerstone a lot. They were a local band from here, and they were always talking about like how it was like some of the best shows. Even they would play like those crappy generator stages, but they were like, man, there's some of the best shows that you could see. And I was like, fuck, it sounds so cool. So Justin, what about you, man? What are your roots there?
So my roots, somewhat similar to Brian's, though uniquely and distinctly very different. I also didn't really have a guide that got me into it. My parents were always pretty conservative. My mom was really into the hair metal thing in the 80s and stuff like that, and so I had that vaguely in the background, but to get into heavy music, there was nothing. I mean, when I was about 12 years old, my parents wouldn't let me listen to CDs that had warning labels on it or heavy music at all, because they thought it was evil or whatever. And they were also at least my mother was very heavily influenced by the trashy talk shows of the time and the news editorials that would say that heavy music was, you know, ruining children. So I never really had an actual path, but really the tipping point for me and what set me off into heavy music was just my own isolation and my own need for something more. And so I would I would find certain things on the internet that I liked a lot, and I would kind of like gravitate towards them. So for me, it was more late 90s. So a lot of the first bands that I got into were all kind of the nu metal genre.
Yeah,
they were of the ilk of nu metal and a lot of industrial stuff. And so I kind of like grew from there, and just out of necessity would find new bands. And I never really had a cool cousin or a brother or anyone that would show me bands. It was just kind of my own devices that would lead to finding this new music. And then from there, I would ultimately kind of like see certain things, especially because this is when the internet was fairly new, and I would utilize it to find stuff and looks and appearances and stuff like that. And so I kind of figured out, that I really liked the way that the aesthetic properties of a lot of these bands and what they put forth, I thought was really cool. And so from there, I just kind of started gravitating towards that and making friends that were listening to similar music. And then by the time I got to like high school, I was starting to get into exactly the stuff that we're talking about, very early 2000s metalcore, some of the spirit-filled stuff, but even though I was very much against religion at that point, some of the early super chaotic stuff, and then also some of the early screamo stuff, like Neil Perry and Jerome Stream and City of Caterpillar and stuff like that. I was really getting into stuff like that without even really knowing what it was. To me, it was all metalcore, really.
Yeah.
And I started going to shows and making friends like that, and that was my whole journey essentially to getting into it.
Yeah, that was one thing I actually wanted to talk to you guys about, because you guys do have like that, I guess for lack of a better term, a throwback sound of those bands like Page 99 and Orchid and stuff like that. And I feel like that's a weird little nugget of almost lost bands that people don't really know about, and they were so good for the time. And I every time somebody name drops a band like that, I'm just like, oh, thank God you know about something cool that was there for like a minute.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing that up, because all the media that I've done leading up to this, most of the people that interview us don't necessarily understand where it is we're coming from. They know it's chaotic and they know it's dark, but they can't hear the same influences. So it's nice that someone kind of gets the Orchid influence. Yeah. Gets the whole thing that we're doing. But yeah, no, that very much plays into what we do. I've kind of made it a point to say that we've almost shirked a lot of what it was we were genreized as in the early days of this band. We were very much pigeonholed into being a screamo band, like only a screamo band. And at this point, especially with this record, we're breaking the chains of that very rigid genre and moving forward into what is essentially our key sound, which is just creating things that we like and that we think is true to who we are, and also uses the influences that brought us here. So
yeah, I think a lot of those bands, especially for me, because like I'm just a music fan in general, man. I'll pretty much, like, especially with metal, I will dig deep to try and find stuff. And especially in my early days, those were a lot of bands that I found too, because they were so chaotic, not necessarily heavy, but I like the chaotic nature of it. And a lot of those bands, I guess, because they were in that weird period of the internet not being super big and social media not being around, a lot of them only put out like a few records or a couple 7-inches or a bunch of 7-inches, and just kind of fell off the face of the earth, unfortunately, it's a shame. But I always tell people, if they're into chaotic music like Dillinger Escape Plan or something like, more well known, to go back and check out bands like that, because that's kind of the roots of that, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for not comparing us to Converge or Zao.
No. I don't hear a Converge at all in there, but that's just me.
We get those a lot. We love those bands.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, dude, my room is like covered in Converge shit, so I'm like one to talk.
We're all big Converge and Zao fans, but that's absolutely not that's not really where we draw our influence from as much as people would like to think.
Yeah, I think the only like Zayo stuff I would hear is like mainly a little bit vocally, but not overwhelmingly in my opinion. But it's just kind of me, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So what got you guys interested in playing your respective instruments? You know, how did that start? Because I know that's a very huge undertaking to want to play something and then start a band and write music. You know, it takes a lot of time and labor.
Yeah, I guess I'll be the first to say that you know, I think that learning guitar and having played for, you know, I want to say like 12 years now, I think, probably the best thing I've ever done for myself, in terms of, you know, mental health and just overall happiness. Because I think that, you know, the big reason why I wanted to play guitar was, you know, from an early age I was hearing all these bands and, you know, was like, man, this is so cool. I wish I could do this sort of thing. And, you know, and then started playing video games at a young age, like most kids do. And then, you know, there was like, I think my very first guitar I ever got was for Christmas, and I got a BC Rich Warlock,
Nice.
bronze. Oh yeah, I was loving it. It was probably the coolest thing I could have ever had at the time. And you know, I pretty much taught myself until high school. And when I got to high school, you know, I was pretty shy. I didn't want to experiment with other music like genres and things like that. I was very much like, oh, if it's not metal or hardcore punk, it sucks, you know. And I've grown since then, very much so, and I've learned to appreciate a lot of things. But you know, took guitar in high school and ended up doing you know, we had a jazz combo class, so I learned, you know, jazz basically, and then, you know, did gypsy jazz as an extracurricular and really honed in on my playing skills. And ever since then, it's pretty much just been, you know, continuing to learn and just doing the best I can with a guitar. So yeah, it's a really, really big creative outlet for me, and it helped me through a lot of hard times. And yeah.
Now, was your family supportive of you picking up an instrument? Because I know I get dual stories where some people are like, nah, family hated it, or like, yeah, they helped me out, and it was, you know, good for me to have that. Like, what was that like for you when you decided to like pick up an instrument with your family?
You know, I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and, you know, my 3 siblings, my 2 brothers and sister, they are nothing like me.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are pretty much the exact opposite. You know, my brother plays sports in college. My sister, you know, did cheerleading and stuff all throughout high school, and, you know, so on and so forth. My other brother did gymnastics and is just he's a makeup artist. They're all just completely different from me. But you know, having my dad, you know, be into the kind of music, you know, he was into, you know, we shared that. That was a very big thing for me, is being able to share my love of music with my dad. And, you know, he really encouraged it, and so did my mom. My mom encouraged it a lot. I think that, you know, at a young age, when I was probably like 11, 12, when I started going to shows, you know, she didn't support it as much as she does now, because, you know, she was very much like, oh, I don't want you, you know, staying out late. I don't want you to hurt your ears. I don't want you to, you know, just normal stuff, you know, like, you want to protect your child.
Yeah.
I might understand it, but I get it now.
Yeah,
but,
my dad was the same way, man. It was just like fighting tooth and nail to try and do cool stuff like that when I was younger.
Yeah, I mean, I remember one time, I think I was about 15 years old, and I had told my mom that I was going over to a friend's house to do homework, and I ended up skipping. I ended up actually not doing that and going to see I think it was a Born of Osiris show that was at a local venue right down the street from me.
Oh wow.
And yeah, and at the time, being 15 years old, I loved Born of Osiris, you know, the Faceless,
Mm-hmm.
all the different kinds of like really, you know, techie like deathcore stuff. I was really, really, really into that at that age, and I got in so much trouble when she figured out I wasn't there. So.
Oh shit.
Yeah.
I mean, that's good that, you know, you could share that bond with your dad though, and he was supportive of you like getting into an instrument and having that creative outlet. Because I know that's got to be hard to try and fight against that grain when you want to play, and then your parents are like, "This is dumb. Why are you wasting your time on this?" or something like that, you know?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So who wants to go next?
Go for it, Brian.
All right. So I've been playing drums since my parents got me lessons starting when I was about 7. And pretty much my entire life I've been kind of a bull in a china shop.
Mm-hmm.
Not very graceful, but I can hit things really well. So my parents got me my first drum set when I was in 2nd grade, and they got me lessons too. They got me lessons with a Latin instructor, hoping that I would learn more technique instead of just beating the shit out of things. And it was the best thing that's ever happened to me musically. I took 6 years of lessons from a guy he's now like a cruise ship drummer with a bunch of like salsa bands. And he pretty much taught me, he was like, if you learn Latin, you can play anything. And he was 100% right. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me. But I've always had super supportive parents. I know I drove them fucking crazy until I was 8, moved out. Just sit in the basement and play drums for hours. But it was really cool. I was always like small town. Obviously, I was the only kid my age that was into any kind of heavy music.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't play sports. I didn't want to hang out with the kids at my dad's church. So I would just kind of sit and hold myself up in the basement and play for hours and hours. And my parents were very supportive of that, which I will forever be thankful for.
Yeah, that's got to be an awesome feeling, man. Especially, especially drums are not the easiest thing to learn. And especially, I didn't know that Latin drumming was that integral to like learning how to play all styles. So that's really good to know.
Honestly, I didn't either. I think it was more of a play this super complicated shit, and then everything else will be a cakewalk when you try to learn that. But it was definitely cool. It's nice to have a bunch of chops that, I mean, now playing in this band, I'll probably never actually need them,
Mm-hmm.
but it's kind of cool to have those up my sleeve.
So who are some of your favorite drummers, or like drummers that you admire as far as like ability or skill wise?
Thomas Pridgeon from the Mars Volta, probably my all-time drummer. I had a weird prog guy phase through high school where I had 0 friends and I would just smoke hella weed and listen to Dream Theater. So it was listening to a lot of that. Pretty much anything, like even still today, I'll get on the Gospel Chops YouTube channel and just sit there and watch those guys for hours and just get so frustrated. I love those guys. I love Jojo Mayer, like the drum and bass guy. Just like a human drum machine, which is the coolest shit.
I tried to teach myself how to play drums once, like years ago, because I read in a book that Pete Sandoval from Morbid Angel just sat in a basement and did that. He basically taught himself how to play drums, and I was like, oh, I can do that. Man, was I wrong? I was like the dumbest thing I ever tried to do. I was like, this is way too hard. Like, I don't understand how he did that. Dude's a monster.
Yeah, he's an animal. Yeah, I'm extremely thankful my parents got me lessons, and so I actually learned how to play an instrument, because I feel like without that, I would have given up in a week, and God knows what I'd be doing now.
Justin, what about you, man?
So for me, I started off in middle school wanting to be a drummer. I was like, the few friends that I made in middle school that all liked the same music as me wanted to start a band, and it seemed like drums was the one thing that no one's parents wanted to let them do. So that was the one thing that I said I wanted to do. But the way it all turned out, my parents wouldn't let me get a drum set. So instead, the next year I got a bass. And that was mostly just out of necessity as well, because I really wanted to be a vocalist. But again, like, vocalists are just so easy to come by, especially if you're starting a band. Even at the time when, you know, local bands weren't as popular, like in the early 2000s, when only certain people could actually start bands. Even then, vocalist was the easiest thing to come by, because everyone, even if they don't really know anything about music, could be a vocalist or wants to be a vocalist. So
Yep.
Being a bass player added like an extra like dimension to me as a musician. So it was like, oh yeah, no, I do play an instrument, and you can just corner the market of dudes that play bass, which usually isn't a ton of dudes. So yeah, I picked up bass like that. My parents bought me a combo with a Squire P bass, and I would just sit in my room for hours and hours and hours and just play whatever. I didn't even really know what I was playing. I would just kind of move my fingers to the beat and to the rhythm of the song, and just keep going as fast as I possibly could, and learned that way. Never had any actual training or teaching. So
did you learn everything like kind of by ear, or did you just tabs and figure it out from there?
Oh no, it was all by ear. It took me a while before I actually learned how to even do tab work. I would, like, in the younger years, in the early 2000s, I would listen to bands like Darkest Hour and Black Dahlia Murder, the first Black Dahlia Murder record, and would just follow the speed of them because they'd go so fast. And at that point in time, that was kind of like the fastest kind of stuff I listened to, and just try to follow along with them and try to figure out what the notes were. And I ended up learning quite a bit from doing that.
Damn.
Because after playing over and over and over again these songs that I really liked, I could eventually start to hear where the notes were, and so I would get closer and closer to actually playing the right notes and to being on time with the rest of the song. And it's just one of those kind of willed moments where I just kind of kept doing it until it happened. I just willed it into existence.
Yeah, I was gonna say, man, your dedication to just like not giving up on figuring out those songs is extremely admirable.
Thank you. Yeah, I've a lot of people don't like bass, and I kind of got to the point where, like, I didn't do very much. I didn't really like being in high school. I didn't really have a ton of friends. I just liked music. It was the only thing I ever really cared about. And so when I would come home, I would, do the normal kid things, and then I would listen to lots of music. And I would get my bass out, and my parents would be asleep upstairs. It wouldn't even be plugged in. I would just get my bass out and just start playing along with my headphones. And I did that every night for months and months and years.
I bet that was a hell of a good feeling, though, when you were like trying to nail this one part forever, and then you fucking got it, and you're like, yes, success.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely. I think the best feeling for me was when I finally realized what the tablature meant, because for a long time I would just look at all this tablature and it just looks so alien, and I didn't have any training at all. Like I just would read about online how to read tab, but to varying extents it just started to look like mathematic jumbled mess, you know what I mean? It just looked like a wall of numbers that didn't make any sense. So that was, I think, the best moment for me was when I realized that I could actually read tab, and I would look at stuff like that online, and it would be like, oh, that's what that means. Oh, cool, I can do this.
Yeah, I like that feeling too when I first remember or figured out how to read tabs, and I was like, oh man, it feels so stupid for not figuring this out sooner. Like, it seems so easy once you got it, but that whole time you're just trying to decipher the hieroglyphics. Like, music theory is even worse, man. I tried trying to do that, gave up.
It's horrible. Yeah, no, some of the first songs, like, so back in the late 90s, early 2000s, so I got my first bass in 2001, I believe.
Nice.
And so when I got my first bass was kind of on the outskirts of listening to stuff like new metal, and so like I would like listen to stuff off like the first Stained record, and I would tab that out like in my bedroom, just try to like finger pick it out to where it made sense, and then like from there it would kind of move on to like more industrial stuff. Like I would try to tab out like KMFDM songs and stuff like that because they're real repetitive, so it's easy to figure out what they're playing. And then like stuff like Rammstein, and then it just kept becoming more and more like, oh well, I could play like this metal song, or I can try to play this metal song. And the whole time it wasn't good, to be totally honest. Like, it wasn't like I was close even. I was probably just playing a bunch of random notes that I thought sounded right, but were probably off by at least a couple notes. But it to me it sounded right, and it was essentially the foundation and the base of who I am today. So
yeah, I mean, I think having that will to just like learn it, that says a lot. And I mean, even then, doing it the way you did, you kind of created your own unique playing style in that way, because that's how you learn how to play.
Oh yeah, I played. I mean, and this also hasn't came up in any interviews before, and hasn't really came up in conversation very often. But I play in a very unorthodox way. The way I hold my pick and the way I use my fingering hand is so different from how everyone else that I know plays. It's just very different. It's all a testament to, I guess, essentially what this band is about, and it's that music and our music in general is an escape. Like, it is the escape of all escapes. Like, regardless of who you are, you can listen to the record or you can listen to a song and you can feel like it's taking you somewhere else, and you're in someone else's head. And that was the whole point for me when I was learning random band songs, or when I was listening to music in general. Like, everyone else can not understand what I see in the music, or what someone else sees in the songs, but what you see in it and what you take from it is ultimately the most important thing.
Yeah, I subscribe to that idea 100%. I mean, that's always what got me super invested in bands or music, was the way it like made me not think about whatever was going on in my life, or it could relate to something that was going on in my life, and it made me feel less shitty about it, or whatever. Or it was with a good memory even too. Just like you listen to that song and it takes you all these places. And I try not to pull back the veil when I'm like, hey, what's this song really about? Because it doesn't matter what it's really about if I associate it with something else, and that's what it's about to me.
And to piggyback on that too is this band especially writes about thematic issues that aren't very relatable to the vast majority of the general public. They aren't relatable to most people that are listening to it. They don't understand what it's about. But to those few people who listen to it and find a great kinship with it, it's important, because to me growing up, that music that spoke to me particularly, especially to wherever I was emotionally at the moment, that was the most important thing to me. Yeah. There was nothing that superseded how important it was that person through like my Walkman, like how that person understood how I felt. And to be able to recreate that is so much more important than any amount of like credibility we could get from like major music outlets or any kind of like cool guy cred we could get from people on the internet. Like, none of that matters when you really boil down what you mean to certain people and how you're speaking to them and ultimately changing their life. Because I can say firsthand that a lot of the bands that I listened to at a young age, and even now, changed my life every day.
Yeah. Yeah, same here. And you guys want to go with that more authenticity, like label, than worrying about like being worried about being more worried about like pigeonholed into a certain thing as far as like genre wise.
Yeah, exactly.
So like with this record specifically, I know I've like got a little bit of it in the press release, and we've touched on it a little bit, but there's obviously a lot of emotion and mental health struggles that like went into this. That's something I've tried to talk about with a couple people on the podcast, but I don't think they're really open to talking about it. But like with you guys, it seems like there's a lot of stuff that went into this record that not necessarily needs to be unpacked for everybody to know personally, or for like I don't know what the word I'm blanking on the word here. I'm getting carried away. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
Rambling. It's a problem sometimes. Basically like the soul of the album is what I'm trying to get at. Like you guys put a lot of emotion and stuff into that, and it affected one of you guys personally, or all of you personally. Like what's the story here?
I think we all can prescribe very genuinely to what the record is about. Lyrically, the songs are kind of split into who wrote which song. I can say without any doubt that the songs that I wrote are all supposed to be very personal and very poignant to the topic of mental health, but in a way that I don't feel is necessarily preaching at anyone or telling anyone how to feel, but is just speaking to the authentic happenings of my life and how things have affected me, and how I've thought a lot of the record that I wrote, a lot of the lyrics that I wrote, that is, were written in various dark stages of my life, usually in complete isolation. And I think when you bring something that authentic to a record, you're aiming your focus toward people that can also relate to that, but that probably aren't capable or aren't in the place where they can talk about it, if that makes sense. Like the record is especially meant for people that don't really have an outlet of their own to express these feelings, which are very dark and hard to corner, especially in someone's mind that is looking at the most bleak of possibilities. But the record as a whole, Misery Never Forgets, there is a very strong cohesion between the things that I write about and the things that Jonah writes about. So there's no, even though both of our styles vary slightly, they're all very, very written in a straight line, where they're coming from a right and left side of the brain, so to speak. Like they're coming from the same place.
Okay. Yeah, I think mental health, especially in heavy metal, is something people don't really give enough credence to, because the genre is so extreme. People automatically write it off as like, oh, that's, you guys are fine, you're just angry or angsty or emo, like all that shit. And it's like, well, no, I mean, like all of us struggle with our own demons and sadness from time to time too, and it affects everybody, not just because we're heavy metal dudes, we're angry all the time. And I think the only person that comes to my mind that talks about it fairly often is Jesse from Killswitch Engage, and I'm blanking on somebody else, but yeah, it's a weird thing that not very many people in the genre talk about.
And part of the problem too, especially something that I find troubling about metal in general, and to varying extents hardcore as well, is that there are very strong undercurrents of hyper masculinity within the cultures that doesn't allow anyone to feel anything but being in control and being angry. Like those are the only emotions that you're allowed to have. You're not really allowed to feel anything else. And if you're sad, you're not really allowed to write about it. And I've always felt like that was such a great tragedy that the only people who are taken seriously in metal all have this very pigeonholed outlook on life according to their records. According to their records, they're only angry all the time. They don't feel anything else, and that, I feel like that's so untrue to the human condition. And I don't think anyone that listens to music only listens to music for one single reason. Like, regardless of who you are, and I know there are a lot of really meat-headed jock metal dudes that would that only listen to a certain music when they work out or something like that. But no one feels one way all the time, and so it's very important, in my opinion, for metal and hardcore to branch out and to kind of speak towards these weird masculinity issues that we have within our own culture.
Yeah, I think hardcore especially does have that very aggro, angry, like you said, meat-headed approach to like everything. Break down the walls, keep your feelings inside, like.
Right.
And it's weird because like hardcore is kind of what got me into metal. I feel like the fusion of punk and thrash made hardcore, and then that spread off to other genres. But
right,
it's such a weird thing because it is a very aggressive form of music, and it is a good outlet for that. But when you're talking about like the masculinity aspect of it, it's definitely a very stereotypical person for the most part that does listen to it. I don't mean that in a bad thing. Like listeners out there, don't get mad. We're not like shit talking you because you listen to it, but it's a stereotype for a reason.
Right. And we all love hardcore. It's all a genre that we are very intimately a part of.
Yeah.
And I love it. And I feel like there are a lot of bands that are allowed to be emotional and allowed to show emotion. However, I also feel like there's a very, very pervasive element that says that if you're in a band and you have a microphone, you need to be a certain way on stage in front of people or just in general. They don't really allow a lot of, and it's not just hardcore too, because I feel like it's also very much in metal, like this exact same way.
Oh yeah.
You're not really allowed to feel any other emotions. You're not allowed to show yourself as a vulnerable, broken human being that could possibly, cry on stage or something like that. You're not allowed to cry. Like, you're not allowed to show any of these emotions. And I always really hated that because I just felt like it was so inauthentic to the human condition or to me as a human being. Like, some of the bands I liked the most when I was younger cried on stage. They cried on stage and they didn't care and they didn't think about it because they were just so overwhelmed. And now if you do that, they'll call you the F word, or they'll say this or that, or they turn you into some sort of like sort of effeminate person. A demonized, effeminate, like someone that doesn't belong. And I don't understand that, and I never have. Like, I feel like emotional release should be a huge part of the culture and everything that we do.
Yeah, I've seen two band members cry on stage before. Brian, I don't know if you would be familiar with this band because they are a southern metal band. Do you remember or maybe heard of the band Rifles at Recess?
Yes.
Okay.
That's actually a band that we all listen to a lot.
Oh, right. Dude. Yeah, they're a local band for me, like where I'm at, and every time I saw them play, the singer at one point, he has a song that's very personal about like mental health and molestation and all that kind of dark subject matter, and when he sings it, he would cry on stage every time. And I never thought that was a weird thing, but like I would overhear people in the audience being like, "What's wrong with this pussy? Like, why is he crying?" Right. It's like, well, he put like a lot of his personal pain into that song. Like, why wouldn't he get emotional? It seems kind of ridiculous to chastise him over it.
That's a big thing with our music too, is I think I can speak for the three of us, me, Justin, and Brian, when I say that all three of these songs, regardless of, if I wrote the lyric for the songs that I wrote or Justin's, all three of us are very interconnected in terms of the way we feel, and we all view things very similarly for the most part. And especially when it comes to music, and this band is 100% an outlet for us to, basically voice how we feel and get. I mean, it's a way for me to get these thoughts out of my head that I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable talking about otherwise with just some random person. But that's where putting those thoughts into words, into lyrics, over songs that we write, it's very therapeutic for me. And I think that every time, I think the biggest one for me is every time, off our 7/7-inch, we play a song called 1716, and it's a very, very heavy song for me because 1716 is supposed to be January 7th, 2016, which is the day that one of my best friends here died of a heroin overdose. And it's it's very, 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 very heavy stuff. And at the time when it happened, literally the day that it happened, I was playing a show, and he told me the day before he was going to come out and hang out and everything like that, and he ended up not showing up, and never got to say goodbye or anything like that. And that song is still to this day very, very, very important to me. And being able to play my guitar and scream those words out, it's my way of dealing with that loss, and how much he meant to me as a friend.
Yeah.
And like I wouldn't say I've necessarily cried before, but like cried on stage, I mean.
Yeah.
But it's so overwhelming being able to actually say these things. And I think more recently, our last tour we did, we were in Fargo, and a lot of people may not dig deep into it, as you said, like people have their own feelings attached to certain songs, and that's totally cool. But for me, being able to see, there was one person at the show in Fargo that were screaming the words right back at us as I was singing the first lines of that song, 1716, and seeing that is just it's powerful, man. Like the fact that our music, that my words or Justin's words ring out with somebody to that extent, to where they are going out of their way to come see us and sing those words right back to us. It's really, really really powerful stuff, and I don't think there's anything like it. And that's why this band is so important in terms of just voicing the things that we feel and voicing things that other people may not be able to, or feel comfortable talking about. But that's why we do it, because we are comfortable with it and we want to talk about these things, and this is the way we do it.
And I guess too, with that song, it's also a good way of like keeping your friend's memory, like a memorial for him. You have this song that's about him, I assume.
Yeah.
And when you're singing it, it's like, hey man, this is for you. You should still be here. But the song is like a nice little bridge to that, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's more of a personal homage in my head. Every time we play it, I don't introduce it to my friend or anything like that, but every time we play it, it always goes through my head.
Yeah.
Like, I wrote this song about you were important to me, so on and so, et cetera, et cetera.
So with the new record, let's talk about how you guys kind of wrote it and the culmination of everything, you know, because I really love like hearing about like how the creative process works for everybody, and you know, all those little details of like recording and stuff like that. So when did, like, after you guys got all together and you're like, hey, we're gonna write stuff together, how did that branch out into making this album?
Justin, you wanna take this?
Sure. So for this band, we have a very unique situation. I'm not sure if you had read about this, but none of us live in the same city currently.
Yeah, you guys are all over the place.
Yeah, I live in Las Vegas, Nevada. Jonah has spent, for the last 2 years at least, he's spent time in Washington, D.C. area, and then Brian lives in Louisville, Kentucky. So none of us lived in the same area to write a record together. So essentially we would have a process. So for the demo, obviously it was all Jonah. For the 2 EPs, it was Jonah sending me pre-pro tracks, and then either me like saying, hey, we should do this, or just not saying anything, and then them just going straight through. Essentially the 2 EPs were almost verbatim from our pre-pros to our final versions. We took the pre-pros. I took the pre-pros that Jonah wrote. I kind of messed around a little bit on bass with them, and then we recorded them. They came out pretty similar, and then the vocals were both also done individually at different places. And Jonah would do the vocals. He sent some kind of like some rough tracks of the vocals that I could kind of go over, and so I kind of copied over certain parts of the vocals, and that ended up being what I was doing. For this newest record, we kind of had a much more fervent back and forth, where Jonah had pre-pro'd some tracks. We would listen to them. We would kind of go back and forth a little bit on them. There was a break because we were kind of touring and doing stuff at that point in time. I went up to DC and hung out for a weekend, and we literally just wrote. We wrote about 4 tracks that are now on the record.
Nice.
The just rough versions of them too. Like, the best part about this record is nothing that we originally pre-pro'd came out that way on the finished version. I think every song is considerably different from their pre-pro version, because everything needed to be organic and needed to flow in a way that made sense with the whole record. And so to record this one, while we all did instrumentally, we all instrumentally recorded in our own cities, we got together to record the vocals in Jonah's friend's attic. And so it was nice to be able to be together and record the vocals, and then also get ideas for where we wanted to go with the mixing of the record. So the cohesion and the organic kind of movement of the record was a lot easier for this one, I would say, than for anything else that we've done.
Yeah, that's a pretty big, I guess, thing to have to overcome, is the fact that you guys are all in different places. And I mean, it's good the internet's so accessible, so you can just send files and stuff back and forth. But you know, being in the room with each other is just as imperative to getting songs and music out as, you know, being across the country from each other too. So so I bet things just like kind of flowed a lot better once you guys were in the same place. And then is that why like things kind of changed from the pre-pro?
I think things changed from the pre-pro because we just kind of grew as the process went. To keep all of everything in perspective, the first pre-pros that are coming out on this record that comes out next week, the first pre-pros were done in 2017 with the first incarnation of this band. So essentially some of the oldest songs on the record came out in the first 6 months that we even were a band. So there's still a lot of older stuff still making the final version of the record. And so I think ultimately we needed to bring all of that up to speed to where we are now. Which was very easy to do when we were all together, and it was very easy to do when we were touring and playing a lot more. So I feel like there was no way that we were gonna put out a record that sounded just like the one we did in 2017, or just like anything we did in 2017, and that was only benefited by the fact that we had these pre-pros for so long, and we could organically move them where they needed to be.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because a year and a half, that's a pretty long time to come up with new ideas and like shift things around and like you said, grow as musicians and people. And yeah, that makes a lot of sense now.
Right. But at the same time, like, I mean, in my opinion, a good riff's a good riff, and you can repurpose anything you want anywhere. And if you're a good enough songwriter, you could use anything in any capacity and make any song better. And that's kind of how it was for us. Like, we knew there was a lot of special stuff going on with our immediate pre-pros that came right after the 2 EPs were released. So keeping that was integral to this whole process, because I mean, when you come up with something good, you gotta roll with it. I think, in my opinion, like, I don't think you get rid of ideas just because they're old.
No, yeah, I think to add on to that, I think the big game changer for, I think, in my opinion, was the three of us actually being able to sit down in a room and record all the vocals together. It really changed a lot of the tones of the songs from, what I know for me, when I originally write bones for the songs, so to speak, like, I have a certain thought in my head, like, oh, it'll probably sound like this. And, over time, adjusting things and going back and adding in, taking out, and getting the songs that we had after they were all recorded and going to do vocals, coming all together and hearing, especially I think for me, hearing some of the things that Justin had in mind for the songs, I would have never pictured. And I think it really changed the game as far as the way this band is, because, before it was pretty much, it was all just screaming and pretty straightforward in a sense. And, but this record is much more of like who we are as a band now, and a lot of the things that we did and a lot of the ideas that the three of us brought to the table as far as vocals go, it really changed, for me, it changed how I saw some of the songs, and it made them even better,
Yeah. So
I was really impressed because it also added new life into, as Justin said, some of these songs were pre-pro'd back in 2017 after we released the double 7-inch, and really breathed new life into some of these songs that I had a thought of in my head, like, oh, it'll sound like this, but then at the drop of a hat when we're recording vocals, it goes a whole different, ends up being something so good that I couldn't understand that I didn't think of it before.
So that epiphany of having the other members' input there.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think that without Justin and Brian, Wristmeetrazor would not be Wristmeetrazor, and I firmly stand behind that. I mean, granted, I couldn't, none of us could have done this band without each other, because all three of us are just so interconnected creatively, and we just work really well as a team and as a band.
That's good. You don't hear that too often, man. I mean, not openly. Eventually you'll hear about somebody in a band being like, yeah, I don't like this guy, years down the road. But that's good that you guys like have that cohesion and you're all on like creatively the same page and stuff, because that's a good thing to have, and I think it makes the music sound much better in the end product.
Yeah, absolutely.
These guys are my two best friends in the world. I couldn't
100%.
imagine doing this band with anybody else.
So the one thing vocally, since you all do vocals, that's a very, I mean, I can't think of any other band off the top of my head that has 3 people doing vocals, and I have to think that is a very hard thing to puzzle together. Like, how do you make that work? Like, I've heard it, how it works, obviously, listening to the record, it definitely works, But when you're sitting there getting everything together, like how in the world did you piece that together with who's gonna do what vocally?
So I kind of explained this. I've explained this a couple times in the press for this. I feel like this is a very unique thing that no other band that I've ever been a part of can really relate to. But the way we write lyrics, Jonah and I, is both starkly different, and it's interesting because the two skills that we use to write lyrics and patterns kind of work together in a way that I don't think most people will even be able to know when they listen to the record. Like they'll have no idea that the amount of like I guess luck to a certain extent that's at play here when you're listening to the songs. So for me, when I write lyrics and when I wrote the lyrics for the songs that I did on this record, I had 100% everything in mind. It was all planned. Everyone's parts were planned. My parts were planned. Like the different inflections that people were going to use were planned. Everything was planned. And then when we got into the studio, certain things had to be changed. But for the vast majority of it, nothing was any different from how it was heard in my head months and months before. However, on the flip side of that, Jonah, as someone that writes lyrics, is a very different kind of lyric writer. Jonah has a lot of ideas, and he's a very conceptual guy. And when he brings all these things to the plate at recording, he's not giving like the exact like this is everything that's going to happen. He's very fluid, and it's all very stream of conscious, where it's like, let's move with this organically and let's just see what happens. Like I think you'll sound good here, but let's just kind of move with it and see where it goes. And so those songs all kind of came out sounding in a lot of ways very organic and natural with all of us doing vocals. But you'll never, I feel like unless you were told, you probably wouldn't exactly know who did which song even, which is just such an amazing and almost lucky thing that our styles worked so well together and so unknowingly well together.
Yeah, and that's where I say like we all just really meshed really so perfectly together that a lot of the things, as he said, like it's your luck that the three of us and our three creative ideas for how we would do vocals, they all just somehow managed to fit together perfect, like a puzzle. And it's not necessarily easy to do, but somehow we've done it. And yeah,
I feel like Brian has the worst of it, man. I just knowing like drumming, how much work that takes, but to sit there and have to like scream at the same time you're drumming, like, dude, you must be like exhausted by the end of your sets.
Oh, it absolutely kills me, but it's so much fun. On top of that, I get, for the most part, at least when I joined, I joined by filling in for this band for a tour, and ended up, I was like, hey, like, I want to do some vocals too, and Jonah was pretty much like, okay, here's all the parts I hate doing. All of them.
He's not wrong. And to give some context to that, so at the very beginning, when I wrote the demo and I did it all myself, I literally had no idea that this would become a band and we would end up touring and getting signed to Prosthetic records. I'm still completely dumbfounded that it's come as far as it has. But at the very beginning, I had no intention of, playing any of these songs on guitar and singing at the same time,
Mm-hmm.
And as the time came, when we started playing shows, I was like, I had never played guitar and sang at the same time before in my entire life. I've dabbled in it, but I had never done it before. So when it came time to play shows, I was like, oh my God, how the fuck am I going to do this?
Yeah.
So that's where that is. But now it's very much, everything's laid out to where everybody's comfortable with what they're singing and, what we're able to handle as far as, pulling double duty, since we all do it,
Yeah, I'm very thankful to get parts that aren't awful to do live for the record. Big fan of playing the new songs.
So, did you guys already have this record in mind before the prosthetic stuff, or was the prosthetic thing along with the record as far as like the signing?
That's one of the most interesting facts that hasn't really been touched on by too many people. This record was coming out whether we were on prosthetic or not. The ideas for the record, like I said, came all the way from back in 2017. And we knew it was going to be a full length, and we knew we were going to just do it. There was some smaller labels that we've gotten a lot of support from through the years, specifically Bitter Melody Records out of North Carolina, and they were very interested in putting out this record way before Prosthetic was. Yeah, shout out to Grant. Very cool guy. Very cool record label. The record was coming out either way, and even more than that. And even more interesting than that is that we had Chris Taylor from Page 99 and Pygmy Lush do the artwork for this record even before we were signed. Like, we spent our own money just to get him to do it, because we felt so fortunate that he even liked the band and wanted to do it, that it was always going to happen. And us getting signed to Prosthetic was more or less just a blessing and a way to utilize some additional funds to put out this record in the capacity that it needed to be put out. But regardless, it was coming out. So this is all a long time coming.
That's awesome. Yeah, because it could have been, I guess I assume you guys would have either like crowdfunded or, like you said, went through like a smaller label to get it out.
Right.
Yeah, it's such a weird thing. Like, I hear from different people all the time, like my own friends in the music industry, and they're like, we're just going to put it out ourselves. It's where we make the most money, blah, blah, blah. Like, we don't need record labels. And then, guys like you or other people I know, they're like, nah, man, like, we need the label to help us out, like, to get us tours, to get us, all this media stuff. And it's like, yeah, I can see both sides of it. That's the weird thing, is like, I understand both sides. I guess it just comes down to the needs of the band and the members in the band, as far as that goes.
Absolutely. And I think one of the big things for us too is all three of us have spent our entire music careers in the DIY scene, so we know exactly what it takes to do it without a record label. We've been doing it for years.
Yeah.
So the welcome change of having a record label and having someone say, hey, it doesn't have to be this difficult. Like, we'll make this a little easier for you so you could put out the record that you want to put out because we believe in you. And for me, like, the record label thing is more about getting support from people that believe in your vision and who you are and want to help get it to as many people as possible because they believe that it's important. And like, just that alone, that sentiment alone is enough for me to believe in putting out records through record labels. You know what I mean? And it's one thing if you're putting out a record that a label's just doing for the potential to make money or just the potential to possibly, hedge a trend that's coming out. But it's another thing when you're a band like us and a record label like Prosthetic comes up and they're very genuine and they just very much support and love you as human beings and what you're doing. And so it's a no-brainer that we would want to continue working with, great people.
Yeah, I've heard too many stories, man, about certain record labels. Actually, I've already shit-talked them enough on this podcast. It doesn't matter. Victory Records. I hear so many. Even the band that I toured with, they were on Victory for a while, and man, the fucking stories we got from them is just like, that label is such a giant pile of shit. And they rip off so many bands, and like you were talking about, they just pick up bands that are like the next big thing just to make a quick buck, and it's like,
right,
that's not what music is supposed to be about.
Right.
You're not fostering anybody. I mean, I guess the good side is they are fostering somebody's creative outlet and idea, which is good.
Right.
But, they're getting ripped off, it's
right.
A double-edged sword.
The best thing about all of it is that, on one side you got, Victory Records, who has, a track record for, ripping people off and, trying to make money,
yep,
so to speak. But, one thing that I know we all love is that Prosthetic Records, everyone at the label in, pretty much every facet of the label is super supportive and truly believes in what we do, and actually talks to us on a personal level, and likes to hear from us and see how things are going, so on and so forth. And that's another reason why Prosthetic is, we're very thankful for them, because they, as Justin said, they really believe in what we're trying to do, and nothing beats it, man.
Yeah, I have to agree with you, man. Their PR people, especially Ebony, man, shout out to her. She's always so awesome. Every time I talk to her, she's like very helpful and like always hooking me up, and I'm like, thank you so much. Like, what did I do to deserve this? So yeah, the few labels that I like am in touch with, I feel like Prosthetic are the best. I agree with you there.
Definitely.
So I want to talk about gear real quick, because I'm super into that. Like, what all do you guys play? Like, what do you tour with versus what you recorded with, or is that the same kind of gear?
Oh man, I could talk about gear for days if I really wanted to, but to keep it down and dirty with you, I'm very into gear, and when I first started playing in bands, I had no gear. I still have it to this day, but when I graduated high school, I was fortunate enough to be able to use some graduation money that I had to buy a Ernie Ball by Music Man, Sterling by Music Man, JP7 model, and it's like mid-grade level. It's a good guitar, but that was like literally the only piece of gear I had, and so like a couple years later, fast forward, got a decent job and was able to actually afford to finance and buy things here and there, and now I'm just a full-on gear, and it's a blessing with a curse. My wallet hurt, but my heart is full. Yeah, so I mean, as far as live and recording, it's all pretty much the same.
Nice.
Yeah, I think more recently I've been using a Parker guitar, which I'm very fond of. It's very lightweight, very nice, perfect for me. But I got in touch with Sasha Dunable from Intronaut, and he has his company, Dunable Guitars, and we were in Chicago, and we're lucky enough to stop and have enough time to go to the Chicago Music Exchange. And I've heard about his guitars before and whatnot, but played one there and immediately sought out contact info, and bought a custom guitar from him, and I should have that here next month. But yeah, I mean, if you want to know like specifics like heads and stuff like that, I can go into that, but that's pretty much the basic gist of it.
Yeah, I always find it fascinating with like what people use and record with. I mean, maybe more so it's a lot different now in modern era, because I feel like in the older era everybody's using just like fucking everything they could because it was so new. Nowadays it seems like a lot of people use pretty standard gear all across the board, with like heads and amps and stuff.
Yeah, I think the most popular that I've noticed, at least in the past year or so, is the PV EVH3.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a I can't remember if it's a 6505 or not, but it's like a 50 watt head. But I've been seeing a lot of bands recently, and it's a good head, but I think that like everybody has their own sound, and if you like that sound, that's cool. But for me, I always try and find something that's unique to me, more or less.
Yeah.
Not everybody else's tone is not unique, but I mean, for me, like I've been since the beginning of the band, I've been using a 1980s Randall solid state head with 4 pedals, just a tuner, noise suppressor, 5150 overdrive by MXR, and a pitchfork pedal, which I very sparingly use, just for the sheer fact that it's used a lot by a lot of bands nowadays that are, doing chaotic things, and I like to be tasteful about it. But yeah, so I mean, I don't really use the conventional gear, like a 5150 head or, a JCM 800 or something like that, Marshall, whatever.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, that's a lot of cool stuff, man. I feel like everybody's setups are always unique to them, and I love hearing about that stuff, especially like pedals too. It doesn't get talked about enough, I think. People are always just worried about like, oh, how did you write this song? And but I like hearing about the gear and stuff personally.
I mean, I'm always looking for something else. The quest for the perfect tone is never over, and that's you ask anybody who is into gear and stuff like that. It's never you never find the perfect sound. You're always looking to build, and that's exactly what I do. But for the most part, it stays pretty standard.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy how many bands like never have a consistent sound. It's very rare that a band sounds the same throughout all their records. There's always something that's going to change in like their tone or treble or whatever, as far as recording. And I've always found that pretty interesting myself because, there's always that one record that you love where it's like, this is the fucking guitar tone. But then, you hear them talk about it, they're like, I don't like that guitar tone. That was a mess up,
Yeah.
But to you, it's like, this is the God tone.
Yeah, pretty much.
So what do you guys like the most proud of with this record? I mean, obviously getting it out is one, but I mean, you guys put a lot of work and heart and everything else into it. I mean, what is it that you're the most proud of with it?
I think that what I'm most proud of is that I've been able to create something so important to me, and I've also been able to create, not create, but gain two of the best friends I've ever had in my entire life. And to be able to do this all with them is probably the most rewarding thing about this. And I'm most proud of that. I'm most proud of the friendships that I've made with them.
I'd agree with that.
Yeah, that's something you guys are just going to be like friends for life, going down like a journey like this, being in a band. And how many tours have you guys done, by the way?
4-ish.
Yeah, so you guys already know you've been in those close quarters in vans and
oh yeah,
just
right.
sweating
Right.
balls in the summer.
Today.
Every time we get a hotel or motel or anywhere where it's pretty confined, me and Brian are almost always directly next to each other. Two big balls in a full size mattress.
Oh, always. I mean, we got a house together today, so we're kind of stuck with each other for a while.
Yep.
But love that guy to death.
Yeah, that's the one thing I miss about touring, man, is like just seeing my friends, hanging out with your friends every day and like learning, just the dumbest shit about people and the funniest things and what gets on their nerves and what gets on your nerves about them. And or if nothing at all, nothing gets on anybody's nerves, but something will. That's the thing.
Oh, we definitely push each other's buttons.
So you guys have a tour coming up really soon, right? Like next 2 weeks, week after the record comes out?
On Thursday.
Oh, nice. Yeah, you guys are coming sort of close to where I'm at, but not close enough that I can make it out to a show. But I'm sure you guys will have more tours throughout the year.
Oh yeah, no, I believe we have where in Tennessee do you live?
I live in Chattanooga, but the good thing is I'm an hour and a half away from Nashville and Atlanta, so super solid area.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'm sure we'll be. I know we'll be in that area this next year for sure.
Nice.
But yeah, no, we have a tour coming up. It starts in Hingham, Massachusetts, which is a suburb of Boston, and then goes for a week and finishes up in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. So it's essentially all up the eastern coastline.
What are you guys looking forward to the most on the tour, especially with like having the newest material I mean, is it just like getting it out to the people, having records to finally give to people? Like, what is it that you're looking forward to?
Yeah.
Honestly, for me, it's obviously putting the record out is cool. Like, obviously, these songs are really cool to listen to, but playing them live, just it feels right. It feels different than anything I felt playing music in any other band. And I'm pretty sure to date this is the longest run that we've done. So getting to do that for a week straight with no off days, really excited about that. And on top of that, we're doing this tour with our friends in Heaven's Die and God Program, and I'm extremely excited to watch both of those bands every night.
Justin, Brian, what about you guys?
That was Brian.
Sorry.
For me, you're fine. For me, the whole bringing the authenticity to people, especially new people that haven't heard the songs before, is a great moment. I really like and enjoy the just the intensity of the live show, and then also seeing the faces of people who've not seen us live before and seeing how they take these songs. I feel like everyone kind of has a different reaction to us, and these are all cities that we've, outside of like one or two, these are all places that we've never played before. So it's going to be an interesting journey to see how everyone is.
Yeah, definitely. I think I'm on board with Justin and Brian. I feel the same way with both of them. I think being able to hear the music online is one thing, but being able to play it for people who listen to us or who have never heard of us, that's probably the most exciting thing. I mean, I've pretty much grown up on the East Coast for most of my life, and to bring something that's so important to me and to Justin and Brian to bring it out to everybody and have them be able to see us and experience our live show and how we do it is real exciting. I'm real excited about that.
I'm glad you have that enthusiasm, man. I don't hear that too often. It's nice to hear that somebody's like ready to actually play shows and play songs, because I think a lot of times it's like old hat for a lot of people. They're like, oh yeah, we've been doing this for a few years, it's whatever. I miss hearing that from people, is that like, fuck yeah, I'm ready to play these songs, like let's do it.
Oh yeah, no, our live show is essentially the purpose for this band. It's nothing without a very energetic and frantic live show. And so anytime we get the opportunity to go do that, I think we all take it very, very seriously. It's the number one priority is kind of shocking an audience into paying attention. I think it speaks much better to the music than even listening to it does, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, man, I want to thank you for all the time you gave me today. That was awesome. I fucking love talking to you guys and everything that we got to touch on. I guess we have to go the cliche route, and let's hear when the record comes out and where everybody can find it.
The record comes out January 18th via Prosthetic Records. I think the best way to figure out where you can buy it would be to first follow us on all of our various social media accounts. Yes. So on Facebook, it's just Wristmeetrazor, all one word. On Instagram, it's wrist_meet_razor. And then on Twitter, it's Wristmeetrazor_X. It should be on every streaming site and in every store that sells music. So
awesome. Any other things you want to let anybody know about?
I don't know. Other guys, what do you think?
Not that I can think of, really.
Cool.
Not really. I think all we can say is, thank you for having us.
Yeah, definitely.
Podcast, and giving us your time. We enjoy talking about the band and how things come to be. So again, thank you for having us.
Yeah, of course.
Definitely appreciate how natural this has been. You've been very easy to talk to, so it's made this seem like a conversation. It's been really nice.
Honestly, man, I really do appreciate that. That's like the best compliment I could honestly get, because I know you guys have been doing this shit like all fucking day, and the last thing, I know I probably ask a few things the same as a lot of people. It's inevitable, but I don't know. I just like to talk about shit, not just ask questions.
Oh yeah, totally. Well, and it gave us, or at least it gave me, the opportunity to touch on all the things that I usually like touching on when talking about the band and the records. So no, it was very cool. Definitely very appreciated by me.
Of course. Well, listeners, that was Jonah, Justin, and Brian from Wristmeetrazor. Thank you guys for coming on. I will talk to you all soon. Okay.
Be excellent to each other. And party on, dude!